I never thought I would end up arresting my own HOA president, but life has a funny way of surprising you when you least expect it. The snow started falling on a Thursday afternoon in February, one of those classic Midwestern blizzards that turns Milwaukee, Wisconsin into a frozen nightmare within hours. I had just gotten home from my shift at the Milwaukee Police Department, still wearing my uniform under my heavy winter coat, when I noticed the weather forecast on my phone showing 18 inches expected overnight. Being a cop teaches you to prepare for the worst, so I immediately went to my garage to grab my snow shovel and get a head start on clearing the driveway before the storm really hit. That was when I discovered it was missing. My name is Patrick Winters, and I have lived in the Riverside Meadows subdivision for 3 years now. It is a decent neighborhood with neat rows of 2-story colonial houses, manicured lawns, and an HOA that makes living here feel like walking on eggshells 24/7. The president of that HOA is a woman named Patricia Cromwell, though everyone calls her Patty behind her back, usually followed by some choice words I cannot repeat in polite company. She is 52 years old, drives a white Lexus SUV with vanity plates that read HOA Boss, and has made it her personal mission to make my life miserable ever since I moved in. The feud started small, like these things always do. She cited me for having my garbage cans visible from the street on a non-collection day. Never mind that it was 7 in the morning, and I was literally in the process of wheeling them back to my garage after the truck came by. Then, there was the incident with my mailbox being the wrong shade of black, requiring me to repaint it to match the HOA-approved color chart. After that came violations for my lawn being a 1/4 inch too tall, my Christmas lights staying up 2 days past January 1st, and my car being parked in my own driveway facing the wrong direction, but stealing my snow shovel during a blizzard. That crossed a line from petty harassment into something else entirely. I stood in my garage, staring at the empty spot where my shovel should have been. I had used it just 3 days ago to clear some ice from my front steps. I distinctly remembered hanging it back on its hook right next to my rake and garden hoe, both of which were still there. My garage door had been closed and locked since then. The side door was also locked. There was no sign of a break-in, which meant someone had taken it while the garage was open, probably yesterday when I had been working on my car. The wind picked up outside, howling through the trees and sending snow swirling into my garage. I pulled my coat tighter and walked back into my house, my mind racing. I needed that shovel. The storm was intensifying by the minute, and without a way to clear my driveway, I would be snowed in by morning. I had to work tomorrow night, and calling in because I could not get out of my driveway was not an option. I decided to check with my neighbors first. Maybe someone had borrowed it, though that seemed unlikely. To my left lived the Hendersons, an elderly couple in their 70s who kept to themselves. To my right was Marcus Chen, a software engineer who traveled for work and was currently out of town. Across the street were the Johnsons with their 3 kids, and next to them was old Mr. Kowalski, a retired firefighter. I bundled up and trudged through the already accumulating snow to the Henderson house. Margaret Henderson answered the door, her kind face breaking into a smile when she saw me. "Patrick, dear, what brings you out in this weather?" she asked, pulling her cardigan tighter against the cold. "Hi, Mrs. Henderson, sorry to bother you. I was wondering if you might have seen anyone near my garage yesterday. My snow shovel is missing, and I really need it with this storm coming." Her expression turned concerned. "Oh no, that's terrible timing. I'm afraid I did not see anything, dear. Henry and I were at our daughter's house most of yesterday. Have you checked with Patricia?" She was walking around the neighborhood yesterday afternoon with her clipboard, doing her usual inspections. My jaw tightened. Of course Patricia was snooping around. Thanks, Mrs. Henderson. I will ask around some more. I tried the Johnsons next, but they had not seen anything either. Mr. Kowalski suggested I check the community Facebook group, which I did not have access to because Patricia had blocked me months ago after I posted questioning the necessity of a $500 annual HOA fee increase. By the time I got back to my house, snow was falling so heavily I could barely see across the street. My phone buzzed with an emergency weather alert warning people to stay off the roads. I was running out of options and running out of time. That was when I saw her. Patricia Cromwell was walking down the sidewalk bundled in a designer parka with fur trim, her blonde hair protected under a matching hat. But what caught my attention was what she was carrying: a snow shovel. My snow shovel, to be specific. I had marked it with bright orange duct tape around the handle after someone at a community cleanup event last year had almost walked off with it by mistake. There was no mistaking that distinctive orange stripe. I stepped out onto my front porch. "Patricia," I called out, my voice barely audible over the wind. "Is that my shovel?" She stopped and turned to face me, her expression morphing into that practiced look of innocent confusion she always wore when caught doing something questionable. "Excuse me. This is my shovel, Patrick. I bought it last week." I walked down my porch steps, snow crunching under my boots. "That is interesting, because I bought that exact shovel 2 years ago and marked it with orange tape. That orange tape right there on the handle." She clutched the shovel tighter, her knuckles whitening even through her expensive leather gloves. "I also put orange tape on mine for visibility. Lots of people do that. This is my property, and I do not appreciate you accusing me of theft." "Then you would not mind if I took a closer look at it," I said, taking another step forward. Patricia backed away, holding the shovel like a weapon. "You stay away from me, Patrick. I know your type. Aggressive, confrontational, always causing problems in this neighborhood. This is my shovel, and I will not be bullied by you." A car drove slowly past, its headlights illuminating the falling snow. I recognized it as belonging to Susan Martinez, another HOA board member and Patricia's close friend. She rolled down her window. "Is everything all right, Patty?" Susan called out, her eyes narrowing at me suspiciously. "Just fine, Susan," Patricia replied, her voice suddenly taking on a trembling quality that had not been there seconds before. "Patrick is just being difficult again, making wild accusations." I felt my blood pressure rising but forced myself to stay calm. Getting into an argument in the middle of a blizzard would not help anyone, and I knew from experience that Patricia was excellent at playing the victim when witnesses were around. "You know what, Patricia? Keep the shovel. I will buy a new one." Her expression turned triumphant. "I intend to keep my shovel, thank you very much. And consider this your warning, Patrick. I saw several violations at your property yesterday during my inspection. You will be receiving citations in the mail. The holiday wreath on your door should have been removed by January 15th, per HOA guidelines. Your welcome mat is not an approved color, and there appears to be ice buildup on your front steps, which is a safety hazard and neighborhood eyesore." I stared at her in disbelief. She was standing there holding my stolen shovel and citing me for ice on my steps that I could not clear because she had taken the tool I needed to do it. The irony was so thick I could have cut it with a knife. "Are you seriously doing this right now?" I asked. "I take my responsibilities as HOA president very seriously," she said primly. "Unlike some people, I care about maintaining property values and community standards. Now, if you will excuse me, I need to clear my driveway before the storm gets worse. With my shovel." She turned and walked away, my shovel slung over her shoulder like a trophy. Susan gave me one more suspicious look before driving off. I stood there in the increasingly heavy snowfall, watching Patricia disappear into the white curtain of the storm, and tried to figure out what I was going to do. The hardware store was my next option, but when I called, the clerk told me they had sold out of snow shovels hours ago. People had been panic buying all afternoon in preparation for the storm. The big box stores were the same story. One employee laughed and told me they had not had a snow shovel in stock since Tuesday. I tried calling some neighbors farther down the street, but no one wanted to lend out their shovels with the storm forecast looking so dire. By 8 o'clock that evening, I had resigned myself to being snowed in. The department had already sent out a message saying all non-essential personnel should stay home tomorrow, and that patrol shifts would be running with skeleton crews. I could probably get away with missing my shift, but it felt wrong. I was a police officer. I was supposed to be out there helping people during emergencies, not stuck at home because my HOA president was a petty thief. I made dinner, watched the snow pile up outside my windows, and tried to relax. The wind rattled the windows and howled down the chimney. Weather reports were now calling for 24 inches with potential for more. This was going to be one of the worst storms Milwaukee had seen in years. Around 10 o'clock, my phone rang. It was my partner, Detective Sarah Brennan. "Hey Patrick, just checking in," she said. "You all set for the storm? Got food, water, heat?" "Yeah, I am good. Just annoyed that I am stuck here. Any word on whether they need extra hands on patrol tomorrow? Actually, that is why I am calling. Captain Morrison wants all available officers to report tomorrow evening if possible. We are expecting a lot of accidents, stranded motorists, and medical emergencies. He is asking if you can make it in." I looked out at my snow-covered driveway, already buried under at least 8 inches with many more hours of snowfall ahead. "I will do my best to dig out. My HOA president stole my shovel though, so it might take a while." There was a pause on the other end. "She what?" I explained the whole situation to Sarah, who had heard plenty of stories about Patricia Cromwell over the years. Sarah had even come to a few neighborhood barbecues and witnessed Patricia's behavior firsthand. "That is theft, Patrick. You know that, right? You could file a report." "What am I going to do? Arrest my own HOA president over a $30 snow shovel? If she stole it, yes. That is literally your job. And given the circumstances, with the storm and you needing it for emergency purposes, this could actually be serious. She is potentially preventing a police officer from responding to emergencies." I had not thought about it that way. Sarah was right, of course. If I could not get out of my driveway tomorrow, I could not get to work. If I could not get to work, I could not help people who might desperately need police assistance during the storm. Patricia's petty theft had real consequences beyond just inconveniencing me. "I will think about it," I said. "Let me see if I can borrow a shovel from someone tomorrow morning. Maybe this will all work out." "Your call, partner. But you are a cop, not a doormat. Do not let her walk all over you." After we hung up, I sat in my living room watching the snow fall and thinking about everything Patricia had put me through over the past 3 years. The constant citations, the passive-aggressive notes, the attempts to fine me for violations that half the neighborhood was also guilty of, but never got called out for. She had made living in this house, which was supposed to be my peaceful retreat after dealing with the stress of police work, into yet another source of stress. Maybe it was time to do something about it. I woke up the next morning to a world buried in white. The snow had stopped around dawn, leaving behind nearly 22 inches according to the news. My driveway was completely impassable, buried under a thick blanket of snow that had drifted even higher against my garage door. The street had not been plowed yet. Nothing was moving in the neighborhood except for a few people attempting to dig out their cars with shovels, including, I noticed, Patricia Cromwell. She was out in her driveway across and 3 houses down the street, wearing a different designer parka today, this one in a flattering shade of red. And she was using my shovel to clear her driveway, which was already about half done. While I watched, she tossed another shovel full of snow onto her lawn, then paused to wave at a passing neighbor who was out walking their dog. Something in me snapped. I pulled out my phone and called the non-emergency police line. When the dispatcher answered, I identified myself and explained that I needed to file a theft report. "What was stolen, Officer Winters?" the dispatcher asked. "A snow shovel." "I know it sounds minor, but I have visual confirmation of who took it, and I need that shovel to clear my driveway so I can report for my shift tonight. The thief is currently using it at her residence." The dispatcher took down all the information, including Patricia's address. "Do you want us to send a unit over?" "No," I said. "I will handle it myself. I just need the report filed for documentation purposes." After I hung up, I bundled up in my winter gear and made my way through the deep snow to Patricia's house. It was slow going, with the snow reaching past my knees in places where it had drifted. By the time I reached her driveway, my pants were soaked, and I was breathing hard from the exertion. Patricia saw me coming and stopped shoveling. Her expression went from surprise to irritation in a split second. "What do you want, Patrick? I am busy." "I want my shovel back," I said simply. "The one you are holding right now." She laughed, actually laughed. "We have been over this. This is my shovel." "I do not know what kind of game you are playing, but I do not have time for it. Some of us actually take care of our properties instead of letting them become neighborhood eyesores. My property would not be an eyesore if you had not stolen my shovel," I pointed out. "Patricia, I am giving you one chance to return my property. After that, this becomes official." "Official," she said the word mockingly. "What are you going to do, Patrick? Call the HOA board. I am the HOA board president. Call the police. Over a shovel. They will laugh you out of the station." "I am the police," I reminded her. "And I have already filed a theft report. That shovel has my orange tape marking on it. I can prove it is mine. You can return it now or I can take official action." Her face flushed red and not from the cold. "You are threatening me." "Abusing your power as a police officer to harass a law-abiding citizen. I will have your badge for this, Patrick. My husband is a lawyer. We will sue you and the entire police department." I had heard about her husband, Gregory Cromwell, an attorney who specialized in real estate law. He had never struck me as particularly intimidating, but Patricia liked to throw his profession around like a weapon whenever she felt challenged. "Your husband being a lawyer does not give you the right to steal my property," I said calmly. "Last chance, Patricia. Give me back my shovel." "Get off my property before I call the police myself," she hissed. "I am the police," I repeated, "and you just refuse to return stolen property. That makes this official." I pulled out my phone and took several photos of her holding the shovel, making sure to capture the orange tape clearly visible on the handle. Patricia's eyes widened as she realized what I was doing. "You cannot do this," she said, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. "Watch me." I turned and made my way back through the snow to my house. My heart was pounding, not from exertion this time but from adrenaline. I had just crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. Patricia Cromwell was about to learn that being HOA president did not put her above the law. Back home, I called Sarah and filled her in on what had happened. "So you are actually going through with this?" she asked. She refused to return my property after I identified myself and gave her multiple chances. At this point, it is not about the shovel anymore. It is about the principle. She thinks she can do whatever she wants without consequences. All right, partner, I am with you. What do you need? Can you pull some strings and get a unit sent over here? I want this done by the book, everything documented properly. I do not want her claiming I am abusing my authority. Give me 20 minutes. True to her word, Sarah called back within 20 minutes to tell me that 2 patrol officers were on their way. They arrived about 40 minutes later, driving slowly down the unplowed street in their marked cruiser. I met them outside and explained the situation in detail, showing them the photos I had taken and the empty spot in my garage where the shovel should have been. Officer Mike Rodriguez, a veteran with 15 years on the force, listened to my account and nodded. Let me get this straight. She took your shovel yesterday, you confronted her. She denied it was yours despite visible markings, and she is currently using it at her residence. Correct. And you gave her multiple opportunities to return it. I did. She refused every time and threatened to sue me for harassment. Officer Rodriguez exchanged glances with his partner, Officer Jennifer Walsh, a younger officer I had worked with a few times on cases. They both looked amused but professional. Well, theft is theft, Officer Walsh said. Badge or no badge, you have a right to your property. Let us go talk to her. I stayed at my house while they walked over to Patricia's place. I could see them talking to her in her driveway, though I could not hear the conversation from this distance. Patricia's body language was animated, lots of gesturing and pointing in my direction. The conversation went on for several minutes before Officer Rodriguez reached out and took the shovel from her hands. That was when things escalated. Patricia grabbed the shovel back, yanking it out of Officer Rodriguez's grip. She said something that made both officers stiffen. Officer Walsh took a step forward, her hand moving to her belt. Patricia swung the shovel, not at the officers but in a threatening manner, waving it around while continuing to yell. It happened fast after that. Officer Rodriguez moved in and secured the shovel while Officer Walsh moved behind Patricia. I could not see exactly what happened next because of the angle, but within seconds, Patricia was in handcuffs and being walked toward the police cruiser. My phone rang immediately. It was Officer Rodriguez. Officer Winters. Yeah, we have got a situation here. Miss Cromwell just assaulted an officer and is being arrested. We have recovered your shovel. Can you come down and provide a statement? I grabbed my coat and headed back over, my mind reeling. This had gone from a simple property dispute to assault on a police officer in a matter of seconds. When I reached the cruiser, Patricia was in the back seat, her face red and tear-streaked, yelling something I could not quite make out through the window. Officer Rodriguez handed me my shovel. This yours? Yes, sir. That is the orange tape marking I put on it. She claimed we were harassing her, that you were abusing your position, and that we had no right to take her property. When I attempted to secure the shovel as evidence, she grabbed it back and started swinging it around while threatening us. That is assault on a police officer. We had no choice but to arrest her. Officer Walsh was on her radio, coordinating with dispatch. She finished and turned to me. We are taking her in for booking. Assault on an officer, theft, and resisting arrest. You will need to come to the station later to give a formal statement and press charges on the theft. Understood, I said, feeling a strange mix of satisfaction and disbelief. This was not how I had expected this to go. A crowd had gathered, neighbors standing in their partially cleared driveways watching the scene unfold. Susan Martinez was there, her phone out and recording. Mr. Kowalski stood with his arms crossed, shaking his head. The Johnsons had come out with all 3 kids, who watched with wide eyes as the police cruiser pulled away with Patricia Cromwell in the back seat. My phone started ringing almost immediately. First it was Margaret Henderson, calling to ask what had happened. Then it was Tom Johnson from across the street. Within an hour, the neighborhood Facebook group that I was blocked from was apparently exploding with speculation and outrage. Some people were defending Patricia, claiming this was a setup and that I had abused my authority. Others were celebrating, sharing their own stories of Patricia's overreach and petty tyranny as HOA president. I ignored all of it and focused on clearing my driveway. With my shovel finally back in my possession, I spent the next 3 hours moving snow, creating a clear path from my garage to the street. The city plows came through around 2 in the afternoon, leaving a massive wall of snow at the end of every driveway that took another hour to clear. By the time I was done, I was exhausted, sore, and soaked with sweat despite the freezing temperature. But my driveway was clear, and I could make it to work for my shift. I showered, changed into my uniform, and drove to the station. The roads were still treacherous, with abandoned cars dotting the shoulders and intersections turned into skating rinks where the plows had not reached yet. It took twice as long as usual to make the 20-minute drive, but I made it safely. At the station, I was greeted by a mixture of reactions. Some officers had heard about the incident and thought it was hilarious. Others were more concerned about the potential fallout, warning me that arresting an HOA president over a shovel could turn into a public relations nightmare. Captain Morrison called me into his office as soon as I arrived. "Winters, what the hell happened this morning?" he asked, gesturing for me to sit down. I explained everything from beginning to end, not leaving out any details. Captain Morrison listened without interrupting, his expression neutral. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair and sighed. "You know this is going to be a mess, right? The woman's husband is already calling lawyers, the media is going to eat this up, and every HOA in the city is probably going to use this as an example of police overreach. Sir, she stole my property and then assaulted 2 officers when they tried to recover it. I followed every protocol. I gave her multiple chances to return it voluntarily. I filed a report before taking any action. I did not make the arrest myself specifically to avoid any appearance of impropriety." I know, he said, rubbing his temples. "And you are right, she committed multiple crimes. But you know as well as I do that being right does not always protect you from the fallout. Her lawyer is already claiming you harassed her, that you abused your authority, and that the arrest was retaliatory." "You want me to drop the charges?" I asked, already knowing I would not like the answer either way. Captain Morrison was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No. We do not negotiate with people who assault our officers. I do not care if they are HOA presidents or PTA moms or church deacons. She committed a crime. She is going to face the consequences. But I am telling you right now, Patrick, this is going to get ugly before it gets better. You need to be prepared for that." "Understood, sir." "Good. Now go give your statement and then get out on patrol. We have got a lot of people who need help tonight." I spent the next hour with a detective from another precinct, giving a detailed statement about the theft and the events leading up to Patricia's arrest. Everything was recorded and documented. The detective assured me that it was a solid case, especially with the photographic evidence and witness statements from Officers Rodriguez and Walsh. After that, I headed out on patrol with Sarah. The night was busy, just as predicted. We responded to multiple car accidents, helped a stranded family whose minivan had slid into a ditch, and assisted with a medical emergency when an ambulance could not reach a house in time due to the unplowed streets. It was the kind of night that reminded me why I became a cop in the first place, helping people when they needed it most. Around midnight, during a brief break at a coffee shop that had somehow stayed open despite the storm, Sarah brought up the Patricia situation again. "How are you feeling about all this?" she asked. "Honestly, I do not know. Part of me feels vindicated. She has been making my life hell for 3 years and she finally pushed it too far. But another part of me wonders if I could have handled it differently." "You gave her every chance to do the right thing," Sarah said. "She chose to escalate at every turn. That is on her, not you. I know. But Captain Morrison is right. This is going to get messy. Her husband is probably already building a case against me. The HOA board is going to rally around her. Half my neighbors are going to think I am a bully who arrested someone over a shovel. And the other half are going to throw you a parade," Sarah pointed out. "You know how many people in that neighborhood have dealt with her nonsense. I bet you are a hero to at least half of them." She was not wrong. My phone had been buzzing all evening with messages from neighbors. Some were supportive, like Mr. Kowalski, who texted, "About time someone stood up to that woman." Others were more hostile, like Susan Martinez, who sent a long message about how I had embarrassed the entire neighborhood and should be ashamed of myself. The next few days were a whirlwind. Patricia was released on bail within 24 hours, charged with theft, assault on a police officer, and resisting arrest. Her lawyer immediately went to the media, painting her as a victim of police harassment and abuse of power. Local news stations picked up the story, running segments with headlines like "HOA president arrested over snow shovel" and "police officer accused of harassment." The narrative that her lawyer pushed was that I had been targeting Patricia for years because she held me accountable for HOA violations, and that I had orchestrated the entire incident as retaliation. They claimed the shovel was never mine, that I had planted the orange tape to frame her, and that I had used my position as a police officer to intimidate her. It was complete nonsense, but it played well to certain audiences. Social media erupted with people taking sides. Some defended Patricia, seeing her as a homeowner standing up to an aggressive cop. Others defended me, pointing out that she had literally assaulted police officers, and that theft was theft regardless of what was stolen. The HOA board held an emergency meeting and issued a statement supporting Patricia and calling for my resignation as a homeowner in good standing. They threatened to pursue legal action against me for bringing negative attention to the neighborhood. Susan Martinez started a petition to have me removed from the community, though it only garnered about 15 signatures out of the 200-plus homes in the subdivision. But there was another side to the story that the media was not covering. Other homeowners started coming forward with their own complaints about Patricia's behavior. Tom Johnson provided a statement to my lawyer about how Patricia had cited him for having toys in his yard, claiming they were an eyesore, despite the toys being in his fenced backyard and not visible from the street. Margaret Henderson talked about how Patricia had tried to fine her for having the wrong type of flowers in her garden, arguing they were not on the approved HOA plant list. A homeowner 3 streets over named David Pack came forward with documentation showing that Patricia had been selectively enforcing HOA rules for years, targeting people she did not like, while ignoring identical violations by her friends and allies on the board. He had been keeping records of every citation issued over the past 5 years, complete with photos showing how the rules were applied inconsistently. The more people talked, the more a pattern emerged. Patricia had been using her position as HOA president as a weapon to control and manipulate the neighborhood, punishing anyone who disagreed with her or challenged her authority. The theft of my shovel was not an isolated incident of poor judgment. It was part of a long-running pattern of behavior that had gone unchallenged for too long. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Rachel Torres, who specialized in defending police officers, gathered all of this information and prepared for what she expected would be a civil lawsuit from Patricia's husband. She also advised me on how to handle the media attention, which boiled down to say nothing and let the facts speak for themselves. The criminal case moved forward. Patricia pled not guilty to all charges, and her lawyer filed multiple motions to dismiss, arguing everything from improper arrest procedures to violation of her civil rights. Every motion was denied. The evidence was too strong, the procedures too well documented. Meanwhile, life in the neighborhood became increasingly uncomfortable. The HOA board sent me multiple citations for petty violations, clearly retaliating for Patricia's arrest. I ignored them all and instructed Rachel to handle any correspondence. Some neighbors refused to speak to me, crossing the street when they saw me coming. Others went out of their way to show support, like Mr. Kowalski, who brought over a casserole one evening and told me stories about dealing with his own HOA problems back when he lived in Florida. About 3 weeks after the arrest, I got a call from a lawyer representing a group of homeowners in the subdivision. They wanted to meet with me to discuss Patricia's behavior and potential legal action against the HOA board for selective enforcement and harassment. I met with them at a coffee shop in downtown Milwaukee on my day off. There were 7 homeowners in total, including David Pack and Tom Johnson. They had compiled a thick folder of documentation showing years of Patricia's abuse of power. "We want to use your case as a catalyst," David explained. "What happened to you was the final straw, but it is part of a much bigger problem. She has been running this HOA like her personal fiefdom for 6 years. We want to remove her from the board and potentially dissolve the current HOA structure entirely." "What do you need from me?" I asked. "Your testimony, your records, anything you have that shows the pattern of harassment. We are building a case that she has been violating her fiduciary duty as HOA president and using her position for personal vendettas rather than the good of the community." I provided them with everything I had, every citation, every notice, every piece of correspondence with Patricia and the HOA board. Rachel reviewed everything to make sure I was not compromising my criminal case against Patricia, then gave me the green light to cooperate fully. The criminal trial was scheduled for mid-April. Patricia's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, offering to plead guilty to the theft charge if the assault and resisting arrest charges were dropped. The prosecutor refused. The assault on a police officer charge was serious, and dropping it would send a message that assaulting cops was acceptable if you were sorry afterward. I was nervous as the trial date approached. Despite the solid evidence, there was always the chance that a jury would see this as a cop bullying a homeowner over a trivial dispute. My career could be damaged even if Patricia was convicted, and the media attention had already taken its toll on my peace of mind. The trial lasted 3 days. The prosecutor presented a straightforward case. Patricia had stolen my clearly marked shovel, refused multiple requests to return it, and then assaulted officers when they attempted to recover the stolen property. They showed the photos I had taken, played the body cam footage from officers Rodriguez and Walsh, and presented testimony from multiple witnesses. Patricia's defense was that the shovel was hers, that she had also marked it with orange tape, and that she had been defending her property against police harassment. Her lawyer painted me as a vindictive cop who had been targeting her for years and had finally found an excuse to arrest her. The problem with her defense was the timeline. I had filed the theft report before any arrest was made. I had given her multiple chances to return the shovel voluntarily. And most damaging of all, the body cam footage clearly showed her grabbing the shovel from Officer Rodriguez and swinging it in a threatening manner while yelling obscenities. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. They found Patricia guilty on all counts: theft, assault on a police officer, and resisting arrest. The courtroom was packed with people from the neighborhood, split between Patricia's supporters and those who wanted to see her held accountable. When the verdict was read, her supporters gasped and several started crying. Patricia herself sat stone-faced, her husband gripping her hand tightly. Sentencing was scheduled for 2 weeks later. Patricia faced potential jail time for the assault charge, though her lawyer argued that she had no prior criminal record and deserved leniency. The judge was not sympathetic. "Miss Cromwell, you stole property from a neighbor, lied about it repeatedly, and then assaulted police officers who were attempting to perform their duties," the judge said during sentencing. "Your position as HOA president does not give you the right to take whatever you want. Your status in the community does not put you above the law. You made a series of choices that led you here, and now you must face the consequences of those choices." She sentenced Patricia to 60 days in jail for the assault charge, suspended on the condition of 1-year probation, 200 hours of community service, mandatory anger management classes, and restitution for the cost of my shovel plus court fees. She was also ordered to resign from her position as HOA president immediately. Patricia's supporters were outraged, claiming the sentence was too harsh for such a minor incident. But others, including many in law enforcement, felt she had gotten off easy. Assaulting a police officer typically carried much harsher penalties, and the suspended sentence was a gift she should have been grateful for. The HOA situation took longer to resolve. The group of homeowners filed a lawsuit against the HOA board for selective enforcement and breach of fiduciary duty. They presented all the evidence of Patricia's pattern of harassment and the board's complicity in allowing it to continue. The case was settled out of court, with the entire board agreeing to resign and new elections being held. The new board was made up of homeowners who actually cared about the community rather than wielding power over their neighbors. One of their first acts was to review and revise the HOA rules, eliminating many of the petty restrictions that Patricia had used as weapons. They also implemented transparency measures to prevent future abuse of power. My citations were all voided, and I received a formal apology from the new board president, a retired teacher named Ellen Wright, who promised that the HOA would focus on maintaining common areas and actual community improvement, rather than nitpicking homeowners over minor infractions. Life in the neighborhood slowly returned to normal. Patricia kept a low profile during her probation, rarely seen outside except to go to work or fulfill her community service obligations. Her husband Gregory eventually filed for divorce, reportedly tired of dealing with the fallout from her behavior. Susan Martinez moved out of the neighborhood entirely, unable to handle the social consequences of having been Patricia's most vocal supporter. The media attention eventually died down, moving on to newer and more sensational stories. My career was unaffected. If anything, the case became a teaching example at the police academy about the importance of following proper procedures and documenting everything, even in seemingly minor incidents. One Saturday afternoon in late May, I was working in my front yard planting some new flowers when Mr. Kowalski walked over from his house across the street. "Hey Patrick, got a minute?" he asked. "Sure, what is up?" He gestured at my flower bed. Those look nice. What are they? Petunias. Figured I would add some color now that I do not have to worry about them being on some approved plant list. Mr. Kowalski chuckled. Yeah, that was always ridiculous. Listen, I wanted to thank you for what you did. I know it was not easy, and I know a lot of people gave you grief about it. But you stood up to someone who needed to be stood up to, and this neighborhood is better for it. I appreciate that. Honestly, I was just trying to get my shovel back. I did not expect it to turn into all of this. That is how it goes sometimes. You do the right thing, and it snowballs into something bigger. No pun intended. He grinned at his own joke. But seriously, we have got a real community now instead of whatever Patricia was running. People actually talk to each other. We have got neighborhood barbecues planned for the summer, and the new board is actually listening to homeowners. You made that possible. After he left, I sat on my porch and looked around the neighborhood. Kids were playing in the street, riding bikes and drawing with chalk on the sidewalk. Neighbors were out working in their yards, calling greetings to each other. The Johnson family was having a yard sale, their driveway full of old toys and furniture. It looked like what a neighborhood should look like. People living their lives without fear of petty citations or power-hungry officials looking for violations. It had taken a stolen shovel, a blizzard, and a very uncomfortable few months to get here, but it was worth it. My snow shovel, the infamous item that had started everything, hung in my garage with a place of honor. I had considered replacing it with a new one, but decided to keep it instead. It was a reminder that sometimes standing up for yourself, even over something as small as a shovel, could make a difference. The following winter brought its own storms, but I never had to worry about my shovel going missing. The new HOA board had actually organized a neighborhood snow removal cooperative, where people with snowblowers helped clear driveways for elderly residents and anyone who needed assistance. It was the kind of community initiative that should have been happening all along. I ran into Patricia exactly once after the trial at a grocery store in late summer. We made eye contact across the produce section. For a moment, I thought she might say something, perhaps apologize or at least acknowledge what had happened. Instead, she turned and walked quickly in the other direction, leaving her cart half full in the middle of the aisle. I finished my shopping and went home, feeling neither satisfaction nor guilt. She had made her choices, faced the consequences, and now we all had to move forward. That was how the justice system worked. It was not always perfect, and it did not always feel satisfying, but it was fair. Sarah and I partnered together for another 2 years before she took a promotion to sergeant. We stayed friends, and she still brought up the snow shovel incident whenever she wanted to make me laugh. "Remember that time you arrested your HOA president?" she would say, grinning. "That was the most Wisconsin thing I have ever witnessed." Only in Milwaukee would someone steal a snow shovel during a blizzard and then assault the cops about it. She was not wrong. It was absurd when you looked at it from a distance, the kind of story that sounded made up if you did not have the documentation to prove every detail. But it had happened, and it had taught me something important about standing up for yourself, even when it would be easier to let things go. The Riverside Meadows subdivision continued to thrive under new management. Property values actually increased once word got out that the HOA was not insane anymore. New families moved in, attracted by the genuine sense of community, rather than deterred by horror stories of petty enforcement and arbitrary fines. I stayed in my house, the same colonial I had bought 3 years before the snow shovel incident. I kept my lawn mowed, my mailbox painted, and my garbage can stored properly, not because I feared citations, but because I actually cared about my property. That was the difference between following rules because you were afraid and following them because they made sense. Years later, when I eventually made detective myself, I would sometimes tell the story of the snow shovel to new officers as an example of why procedures and documentation mattered. It sounded like a joke at first, a cop arresting someone over a shovel, but it illustrated important principles about evidence, proper protocols, and treating everyone equally under the law regardless of their position in the community. The law applies to everyone, I would tell them. It does not matter if someone is an HOA president, a business owner, or just a regular citizen. If they commit a crime, they face the consequences. And if you are the victim of a crime, you have the right to justice even if the crime seems minor. A theft is a theft. An assault is an assault. Badge or no badge, you have the same rights as everyone else. Some officers would nod seriously, understanding the point. Others would try not to laugh at the mental image of an HOA president being arrested over a snow shovel. Both reactions were valid. It was a serious lesson wrapped in an absurd situation, which made it memorable and therefore more effective as a teaching tool. The orange tape on my shovel eventually wore off from use and weather. I replaced it with new tape, keeping the marking clear and visible. Not because I thought anyone would steal it again, but because it felt important to maintain that connection to the story. That shovel represented something bigger than its function as a tool for moving snow. It was a symbol of standing up against bullies, following through on principles even when it was difficult, and believing that justice mattered even in small things. Every winter when the first snow fell, I would take that shovel out of my garage and clear my driveway, and I would remember the blizzard when everything changed. The storm that brought 22 inches of snow, buried the neighborhood, and finally gave me the catalyst I needed to stand up to Patricia Cromwell. I never thanked her for stealing my shovel. That would be absurd, and I certainly did not feel gratitude for the harassment and stress she had caused over the years. But in a strange way, that moment when I discovered my shovel missing had been a turning point. It had forced me to draw a line and say, no more. It had shown my neighbors that the HOA president was not untouchable, and it had ultimately led to positive change for the entire community. The story took on a life of its own in local police folklore. Officers from other precincts had heard about it. Dispatchers would joke about it on slow nights. Better keep an eye on your equipment. Never know when an HOA president might steal it. It became a running gag, but underneath the humor was respect for following procedure and not backing down from doing the right thing. My relationship with my neighbors never fully recovered with some of Patricia's former allies, but that was fine. The people worth knowing, the ones who cared about fairness and community over petty power games, those people became genuine friends. Mr. Kowalski and I had coffee together most Sunday mornings. The Johnsons invited me to their kids' birthday parties. Margaret Henderson brought me cookies every Christmas. I learned that you do not need everyone to like you. You just need to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and know you did the right thing. Patricia had spent years worrying about what everyone thought of her, obsessing over her image and status as HOA president, using her position to feel important. And where had it gotten her? A criminal record, a divorce, and a reputation as a cautionary tale about abusing power. Meanwhile, I had my quiet life, my job helping people, my small circle of genuine friendships, and my cleared driveway that I maintained with my properly marked snow shovel. It was not glamorous, but it was honest and it was mine. The seasons cycled through as they always did in Wisconsin. Hot summers, beautiful autumns, frozen winters, muddy springs. The neighborhood continued to evolve and grow. Patricia eventually moved away after her probation ended, relocating to somewhere in Arizona according to neighborhood gossip. I did not follow her story after that. She was no longer my problem, and I had no desire to dwell on the past. What mattered was that I had stood up for myself when it counted. I had followed the law even when it was uncomfortable and potentially damaging to my reputation. I had trusted the system to work correctly, and despite some bumps along the way, it had. Justice had been served, not in some dramatic television-worthy fashion, but in the slow, procedural, documented way that real justice actually works. And every winter, when the snow started falling and weather alerts warned of another blizzard coming, I would check my garage to make sure my shovel was exactly where it should be. Not because I feared it would be stolen again, but because that simple act of verification had become a ritual, a reminder that vigilance matters and that small things can have big consequences. The story of the HOA president who stole my snow shovel during a storm and froze when she saw my name on the police cruiser ended not with a dramatic confrontation, but with quiet resolution. Patricia saw my name on the cruiser that morning when the patrol officers arrived, though I was not in the car. She must have realized in that moment that I had not been bluffing, that my threats of official action were not empty words from an angry neighbor, but promises from a law enforcement officer who knew exactly how to follow through. That frozen moment of realization, captured in the witness statements from Officers Rodriguez and Walsh, when Patricia understood that the person she had been tormenting for 3 years actually had the authority and the will to hold her accountable, that was when everything changed. Not when she was arrested, not when she was convicted, but in that instant when she saw the name Officer Patrick Winters and understood what was about to happen. It was the moment when a bully realized she had finally picked on someone who would not back down, someone who understood that principles mattered more than convenience, and someone who had the tools and knowledge to ensure that actions had consequences. She had stolen from a cop, lied about it, and then doubled down when confronted. And now she was going to face the full weight of the justice system she had probably never expected to be applied to her. Looking back on everything that happened, from the discovery of my missing shovel to Patricia's eventual conviction and the reformation of the HOA, I realized that it all came down to a simple truth. No one is above the law, and everyone deserves justice. A stolen snow shovel might seem like a trivial thing to make such a fuss over, but it represented something much larger. It was about respect, boundaries, and the social contract that holds communities together. Patricia had broken that contract repeatedly over the years, taking advantage of her position to harass and control her neighbors. The shovel was just the final, most visible example of behavior that had been going on far too long. By standing up to her, I had not just gotten my property back. I had shown everyone else in the neighborhood that they did not have to accept being bullied and controlled. Life moved on, as it always does. The snow melted, spring arrived, and another year began. My career continued, my neighborhood thrived under better leadership, and my infamous orange-taped snow shovel remained in my garage, ready for the next winter storm. It was just a shovel, nothing special except for what it represented and the story it told. And that story, ridiculous as it might sound to outsiders, was about justice, principle, and the importance of standing up for what is right even when it is difficult. It was about a cop who refused to be bullied in his own neighborhood, an HOA president who learned that power comes with accountability, and a community that discovered they could take control of their own governance. The snow would fall again, as it always does in Milwaukee. Driveways would need to be cleared, streets would need to be plowed, and life would continue through the bitter cold of another Wisconsin winter. But I would face it with my shovel in hand, my driveway clear, and the knowledge that I had done the right thing even when it would have been easier to let it go. Because in the end, that is what integrity means. Doing the right thing not because it is easy or convenient, but because it is right. Patricia never learned that lesson. I hoped for her sake that she eventually would, wherever she ended up, but that was her journey to make. Mine was here, in this neighborhood, in this house, living quietly and honestly, and knowing that when it mattered most, I had stood up for myself and for the principles I believed in. The stolen snow shovel had been the catalyst, but the real story was about everything that came after. The courage to confront wrongdoing, the patience to follow proper procedures, and the determination to see justice served. That was the story I would carry with me for the rest of my career and my life. Not as a tale of revenge or victory, but as a reminder that sometimes the smallest things matter the most, and that standing up for yourself can change more than just your own circumstances. It can change an entire community.